It Slant defines flash nonfiction as nonfiction that comes in at under 1,000 words. It seems like a really generalized description because it is. I've seen calls for submissions for pieces that are under 1,000 words. I've seen calls for submissions for pieces under 500 words. I've seen calls for submissions for pieces under 300 words. It really varies on the medium as well as the market. But there are some commonalities between all flash nonfiction pieces. It Slant does a pretty good job of giving some tips for writing. Have a strong title. I think the best advice I've ever heard about title is think about something that suggests theme or meaning. This is a better strategy than just trying to pull a word that catches your eye from the piece and plunking it at the beginning. I was at a reading not too long ago with one of my writing groups, and one of my writing group had an essay that they wanted workshopped. They titled the essay Gutted. And my initial reaction to the title was I thought that it would have something to do with a personal event that had upset the writer, that had impacted their life in a negative way. And so they were gutted. Because that's a common meaning nowadays. It's very idiomatic. It's often used that way. So then I read the piece, and I realized quite quickly that yes, that was exactly what this was about, but it was also about something else. And so the writer had used the title really cleverly because it was actually about a health crisis that she'd recently had, and it was about her developing irritable bowel syndrome. So it had a little bit of a play on words. So it had that element of anticipation. The reader anticipates what's in the piece, but then they have that little surprise as well. As you go small, think smaller. What does this mean? Well, be sure that you're focusing on a tight subject, whatever that might be. Perhaps you're expanding on a scene, and that scene has particular meaning, and so you're thinking that that scene will be central to your piece. Now, think about tightening it up. So tighten it, make it vibrate like a string, a taut string. Think about how you can make every word full and rich in meaning. Think about archipelago. Every word is crafted and keeps your mind engaged with the story. Stay close. So if it's one scene that is at the focus of your piece, stay close to that scene. Now, in a piece like Archipelago, we have kind of a series almost of scenes, but it really still pivots on the airplane scene. So it doesn't go very far from that scene. And in Moving Water Tucson, that piece has virtually one moment in time. There's very little lead in to the main event or the climax of the piece. And so we really are focusing on a single moment. Let your ending pack a punch. This is important. With shorter work, we have a tendency to read forward. We want to see where this quick ride will take us rather than sinking into the movements of it, as we do in longer essays. Be sure your ending reflects powerfully on what has come before. We definitely see this in the pieces that I gave you to read. So, for example, Archipelago, which you read a while ago, I see that long chain of islands I live in still, its outline, its history, its secrets of flaming abundance. This absolutely reflects theme here. This piece, Archipelago, is all about Sue Silverman taking uh, her island home with her when she goes to cold New York and finding comfort in that place. And then, even more so, with moving water Tucson, water held him there, rushing on. Uh, the ending really emphasizes what is important about this piece. Memory can be like shining a dimming light through the darkness. It Slant even talks about that, the feeling of seeing an image like that illuminates in a quick flash of light. That's from It Slant. It is tightly focused with no extraneous words, and it minds its images in ways that create metaphorical significance. The language is fresh, surprising, hinged on the workings of the imagination. So yeah, so it's a moment, a flash of light, a moment of clarity. If you have a flash of memory charged with emotion, you can probably write flash. Consider an image, object, symbol that's inextricably bound to that memory. So, what is the emotional core of that memory? Why is that memory important to you? And therefore important to the reader. What makes that moment special? Chip away at the excess detail, dialogue, and description and see what you have left. Rigoberto Gonzalez writes, the form is a direction for the instance when a writer wants to highlight and celebrate a moment of awareness or awakening that will resonate for a lifetime. So in all three of the pieces that I've just been talking about, Undercurrent, Archipelago, and Moving Water Tucson, all three of these hinge on moments that change everything. Like something is happening in Undercurrent. Think about the title for a second, Undercurrent. Something is about to happen in Undercurrent. We never actually get to the main event. Did you notice that? We are in the lead up to something big happening in this person's life. In Archipelago, we're seeing a longer timeline. But then in Moving Water Tucson, we're tightly focused on a moment in time as well. But all three of these pieces, they resonate. They have that feeling of significance. And in all three of these pieces, setting is important. Isn't that interesting? I wouldn't have said that setting is vital to Flash. I don't think it is. But for some reason, it tends to be important. There is no better place from which to touch upon the matter of life and death through Flash nonfiction than the familiar, sacred places within one's own life, and to write in and of those places. The reader should sense the presence of the author, the eye that perceives, records, shapes, and amplifies. In all three of these pieces, we very much feel the narrative voice. We feel the narrator there. In Archipelago, we don't see this person, but we feel them. The same is true in Undercurrent. The same is true in Moving Water Tucson. As you read through the stories I've assigned, you'll probably notice you connect more with the stories that have stronger voices. That's because a strong voice can lead to a strong empathic connection with the storyteller. You'll notice that although the author's presence is not readily apparent in Leap, you should still be able to detect a strong narrative voice. So I added this in because we recently talked about Leap and we analyzed it pretty closely. Leap is really a series of vignettes in many ways, isn't it? So, how can we hear the author's presence in those vignettes? Well, we are seeing those vignettes through the filter of the author's eye. We're being directed to see what is important to the author. We did not choose the material. We are feeling that we are being directed as we move forward. Make every word rich in meaning. I'm 27 feet tall, stretched across the yellow stubble of cropped stalks. This is the opening line for Undercurrent. When are you ever 27 feet tall? Well, you're 27 feet tall in the autumn when your shadow stretches out in front of you. So this quote is rich in meaning, and yet it also is engaging to the reader because it displays imagery and gets you thinking and wondering, well, what's 27 feet tall? And you can picture the yellow stubble, especially if you're from Alberta. But what happens in the fall? Well, there's often a sense of anticipation, a sense of change. We're moving from a time of lightness and warmth to a time of cold, a time of harvest to a time of rest, a time of rest to a time of work. Fall suggests transition. Fall also suggests that we might be going into a dark time that will be followed by a reward, the spring. I once saw a lady drop her transfer in the snow. This is from that coffee sleeve story I asked you to read, which is untitled, and it was written by a student from this class. This excerpt goes straight to the theme of this piece. The theme being that people leave things behind. In this case, I read this as meaning that Celia had someone in her life who moved on, but there are these hints or these remnants of that person that the person left behind. I won't go on about the details from Archipelago because we have talked about that before. And September, I don't think I put that one up on Blackboard because I didn't want to overwhelm you with pieces, but I will in the future. Now, in the Field Guide to Writing Flash Nonfiction,